Thank you very much. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. She said I decided to dedicate my full time, to that. It kind of decided me, I think. It kind of, you say, do you go into the practice, or does the practice kind of go into you? And I think in my case, it was kind of the latter. And I just, I remember going to see my boss at one time, and I said, I think I might be done here. I've been here, I've done a lot of things, I've had a lot of opportunities, but I feel like I might be done. And he reminded me that I had this part-time office in my town where I lived. I lived outside of Boston in Weston. It's a suburb of Boston. And he said, don't you have a part-time office? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, have you ever thought about doing that full-time? I said, no, not till you just said it. But now that you've said it, I think I will. And it kind of rolled from there. Our topic tonight has to do with time. And I've actually had a fair amount of experience, and I'm sure many of you have, dealing with time, hard deadlines and hard budgets and things that don't seem like they're going to yield. And, right from the early going, when I first got out of college and I was working in a graphic arts company, and they would give us these deadlines, these work orders. And you'd look at it and you'd say, man, who dreamed this up? There's no way this can possibly get done. And yet I noticed that by just enabling or allowing it, you might say, just allowing the possibility that it could happen, I saw over and over and over again that it did happen. It was possible. You ever heard the phrase, work expands to fill the time available? You ever heard that phrase? Well, I noticed, and I noticed it a lot, that time also expands to enable what is required. And so our topic tonight kind of grows out of my own experience, where I just didn't like to say no. I figured if it's really mine to do, then I ought to figure a way to do it rather than figure out why I can't do it. And so anyway, I had a lot of experiences like that, and I'll share some of those with you tonight. But really what we're talking about, and in fact I can click this slide, we're just talking about the truth about life. It's an unlimited life that we have the opportunity to lead. And time is a limiter. There are a lot of limiters. There are mortal limits. The number of years and the number of moments in a day, or the number of minutes in a day. Those are limiters if we look at them that way. The amount of muscle mass we have is kind of a limiter. The amount of money that we have in our pockets can be kind of a limiter. But if we can operate free of all those limits and just do what it is that's ours to do, the money and the muscle and the time and everything will be there for us. And so this next hour is not about sort of time management and how to get the most out of this limited thing. That's really what time management is. Time management is you have this finite amount of time and you're going to manage that really effectively. And there are guys that do that. There are guys that know how to do that well. This is really not that at all. This is not anything to do actually with mortal time. It's freedom from that. And it's more of a sense of, what am I supposed to do? And let me go do that. It's kind of like when my boss said to me, have you ever thought about going full-time in the practice? I thought, no, I haven't. But now that you mention it, maybe I will. And it just kind of unfolded from there. I didn't know how I was going to do that. I didn't know how I was going to, make a living at that. But it does. It unfolds. When you kind of allow this thing to unfold for you, it will unfold. And so it's not some new look at time warps or anything else, or time management. This is not a study of mind control. This is just pure life. Life unlimited. Life eternal. Life infinite. Infinite meaning not finite, like time. In physics, time is key. It's always been a key, what they call a fundamental quantity. And there are 7 of them. There used to be 4, now there are 7. Time has always been among them. But time is uniquely problematic in physics, even in physics, because things happen faster than is physically possible. And these things are observable, and they've been observable for decades. And so people have written a lot of workarounds to try to explain these anomalies. You know, when they used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe, and they built all their theories around that, there were anomalies, and they had to do these workarounds to try to explain it. Well, the same thing is true really with time being this fundamental concept, because it really is kind of flexible. It's more flexible than we think. And people have written, like special relativity, Einstein wrote, to try to explain this. There's also a theory called entanglement. You've probably heard of that, where there's a particle in one part of the universe that's somehow entangled with another particle in another part of the universe because things happen between them that are faster than the speed of light would allow. So it's impossible, but visible and observable. Einstein ended up calling it spooky action at a distance. Really, there's no way to explain it. As a matter of fact, I saw recently a book called Spooky Action at a Distance. It's written by a guy named George Musser. He's a contributing editor for Scientific American. And he says this: Albert Einstein struggled with these strange occurrences, which can be found in multiple fields of physics. His description of them gives this book its title, Spooky Action at a Distance. Non-local phenomena so violate what we believe about the physical world that they appear almost magical. Well, it does. These things violate what we've come to expect from these firm laws, these so-called laws. Have you ever seen if you Google this, go home tonight and Google girl lifts car off dad. And what happens is, and I don't know why it happens so often, but it happens a lot, these guys get pinned under their car, the daughter comes out of the house, sees this unthinkable situation, and lifts the car. One girl said, I shoved my weight against it and shoved it out of the way. Pulled her dad out. Now, they're not coming out there, as far as I know, and doing a bunch of push-ups and kind of, checking out how, they come out and do what is necessary. And that, I think, is what we're going to be discussing here tonight. We can do what is necessary. Ever since, this is George Musser again, ever since there have been physical sciences, they've been based on a spatial and temporal view of the world. That's space-time, space-time. Objects exist in specific locations for specific durations of time. And he says, contrary to this, space and time may not be fundamental ingredients of the world. Instead, they may be constructions. And every time you have a construction, you can have an imperfection in that construction. And of course, we do with time. Occasionally, you'll read that they're going to have to tweak the world clock a little bit. They have to just, a couple of milliseconds or something. They've got this organized really well, but they have to adjust it. It's a useful construction. And in fact, I wear a watch. I wear a very accurate watch. I use calendars. I use airplanes that run by schedules and so forth. So time's not really an enemy until we put it in charge. If we allow time to somehow take charge and say, well, you'll never be able to do that, you're too old, or you'll never be able to do that, you just don't have enough time. I'll bet everyone in this room has had something happen to them that happened faster than they ever imagined it could. I know I have, and I know other people have. Somebody asked me one time, have you ever stopped time? I said, I don't think I've stopped time, but I've definitely seen it expand. I've definitely seen it move. And actually, I'm going to tell you one experience I had where that truly happened. And actually, when I was telling my brother-in-law about it later, he said, Well, that's exactly what happened there. Time just expanded for you. And I will tell you that. But in physics, time is problematic, but it's key. But in metaphysics, time is totally irrelevant. In a metaphysical discussion or a metaphysical argument, time is irrelevant. It has nothing to do with it. If I say to you, let's just say, Eiffel Tower, you have an immediate picture of that. I mean, you're not buying euros and checking flights and all that stuff to go see that. It's immediate. And immediate, by the way, has a connotation of already. Already. It's already done. And in fact, immediate means without a medium, nothing in between. It's already done. And in fact, in the New Testament, you start to see that word immediately. Mostly it has to do with Jesus and his disciples. You don't see it in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, I think the word immediately appears 55 times, I think. And mostly it's like immediately the ship was at the shore where they were going. I wonder what that looked like, with somebody, to an observer. I just wonder what that looked like. Immediately the ship was at the shore. Or immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. By the way, I've had that experience, and I'll tell you about that very experience. Immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. There are a bunch of those. Immediately the scales fell from his eyes. Immediately he stretched forth his hand. It's already done. And what we have to do is see that it's done. And then we can experience it and enjoy it. Talking about the New Testament, I actually found a few places in the New Testament, or actually they're throughout the Bible. I'm just going to share a couple of them with you that relate to the concept that we're discussing tonight. For instance, this is a psalm, right? So maybe that was David. David supposedly wrote the Psalms, or most of them. So maybe he wrote this down. 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past. So he glimpsed something and articulated in this way. This is the way it came down through the translations process, and this is the way it appears now in our Bible. And what does that mean? 1,000 years in thy sight. Somebody glimpsed that inspired concept and wrote it down and brought it, and it's come now to us. And it's for us to be able to kind of, consider. How can that, what does that mean to me? The Word of God is quick. Well, that's a time reference right there. The Word of God is quick. God is our refuge and strength, very present. Present here, present now. Very present. I'm just grabbing a few. I'll bet you we could find 50 of these if we looked. God is in the midst of her. God shall help her, and that right early. Early's a time reference. When I was a little kid, I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old, and my mom told me that if I ever got in real trouble, I could reach out to God, and God would help me. And I think she assumed that I was going to end up there sometime, so she told me that, kind of armed me with that. And it wasn't I didn't think much of it, but I remember her saying, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's nice. And then I climbed up on this dresser, not long after that, and I threw a pillow up there, and I was going to call my brother into the room and just rain terror down on him from above. But what happened was I fell. I fell off this dresser. I was on my knees, and I fell backwards. And as I was falling and looking at the ceiling, I thought, man, this is bad. I mean, even a 4-year-old knows when he's in real trouble. And I remembered that my mom had told me that I could reach out to God if I ever got in such a situation. And I said, I think I'm in it. And I did. I reached out. And I said, God, you got to help me. And the idea came to me to interlock my fingers like that and to put that behind my head. So as I was falling, there was a doorknob about here, and my hands just came into that doorknob, or the doorknob came into my hands. And I caught it. And then my feet came down flat on the floor, and it was over. Now, I didn't know there was a doorknob there. I was not reaching for a doorknob. I was just reaching out to God. And the idea came to me. Now, the thing is, I've always thought about that. I don't think I ever told my mother about that, but I have thought about it since, because to me, what that was is we had a little kid, midair, reach out to God, and the idea came right directly to the little kid that saved him, that resolved his situation. And by the way, I'm going to take off my watch. You know, my watch jiggles if I get a phone call. It's very disconcerting. So now, if we had given this group, let's say that problem, we're going to take a 40-pound kid, we're going to drop him backwards, you're going to have about a second to resolve this, and what do you recommend? And we might have come up with something like that, we might have. But to have that actually revealed, you know, mid-flight to a 4-year-old, that's a God who's there early. That's early. God doesn't show up later and go, how'd this happen? God helps us early. You know, this is another one that's just, you know, just hanging out there. 1 Corinthians, maybe Paul wrote that. We shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye. Now, you know, if that had said in the blink of an eye, you might be able to time a blink. You put it in super slow-mo, right? And you put a stopwatch on it, you time a blink, but not a twinkle. There's no time associated with a twinkle. That's right, now. And what we're talking about tonight is that understanding of divine life that includes a timeless sense of everything, an unlimited, infinite sense of possibility and accomplishment, and whatever it is we need to do, we can do. You know, this book, I'm going to actually refer to it a few times here. As you can see, I've got it all tabbed up. I won't read all those, but this book is called Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. Are there some copies here if people don't have one? Well, I can hook you up with one if you don't have one of these. It was written in 1875 by a woman named Mary Baker Eddy. Mary Baker Eddy was born in New England. She was, you might say, sitting near the light. She was looking. She wanted to know about God. She wanted to know about truth, not religion. She wanted to know about God and how this really works, and how love really works, and how truth really works. And she was a student of the Bible. And she saw, as we noticed, there are some nuggets in the Bible. I mean, superior bits of inspired information that flows to us from that Bible. You know, you can look at the Bible in many ways. People look at it historically. They look at it literally. They look at it allegorically. I think there are actually 7 major interpretations of Scripture. But what Mary Baker Eddy says is this: take away the spiritual signification of Scripture, and that compilation can do no more for mortals than can moonbeams to melt a river of ice. The divine science taught in the original language of the Bible came through inspiration and requires inspiration to be understood. I think I got maybe one more of these tabbed. The inspired writers interpret the word spiritually, while the ordinary historian interprets it literally. You know, I did a little study recently of the book of Revelation, and I looked at some of the old woodcuts, and they obviously were looking at it literally. The old woodcuts were showing people with pillars of fire on their legs and stuff. What Mary Baker Eddy found is there is truth in that Bible, and it has to be seen spiritually. And by the way, the spiritual is the eternal, and that's what's true right now. And that's what makes it useful to us right now. You know, this book, by the way, you can see mine's kind of beat up. I carry it a lot, and people use these hard. It is a textbook, and people refer to it every single day. You can see that It opens flat and stays flat. It's a highly evolved textbook. It's got line numbers on it, not just page numbers. It's completely word searchable. You can find basically any concept you want, you'll find in this book. And in fact, there's a little glossary of terms that's included here. And a lot of them are like Bible terms, but a lot of them are just everyday terms, like time. I just opened to it. It says time, mortal measurements and limits. Okay? That's not really what we're looking for, right? I mean, don't you feel like you're kind of measured enough and limited enough? So if you say, I need more time, I think what you really think is what you really need is a different idea, a better idea, something that will actually take you farther. I've got a couple examples I'll share with you in a little bit. But mortal measurements, limits, in which are summed up all human acts, thoughts, beliefs, opinions, knowledge, and it is matter and it is error. So time's not our answer. And by the way, if you feel like you need more time, let's say it's getting to be April 15 and you need more time, no, just do your taxes. Get on with next year already. So, just one quick thing about, a little bit about Mary Baker Eddy. She was kind of a natural metaphysician. She spent her life really in kind of a prayerful approach to things. She was also very courageous. Like she didn't bow to any what she would have called like a false god or a false authority. She stood up for herself. She stood up for her friends. And she was just a young girl growing up in New England. But you know, she was born in 1821. And just think of the state of the country at that time. You had a lot of alcohol being consumed. You had women with very few rights, almost zero rights. And yet she was able to get herself a really good education. She was able to found her own magazines and found her own newspaper and develop her own church and so forth. So she ended up being completely unlimited, I guess you would say. She found a way to get beyond all those mortal limits of that would have been kind of foisted on a woman at her age, at her time. You know, I made one of the statements early on in our little conversation tonight that if it's yours to do, you can do it. I've always loved this little verse from 2 Timothy, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. And when I first read that, I thought, well, that's a typo, that word thoroughly. That someone's going to have to fix that next time they print the Bible. It turns out, though, that it isn't a typo, and in fact, that word appears 6 or 7 times. So I went and looked for what does that mean. And what it means is completely equipped and utterly capable. It's got 2 connotations. You are there and you are ready. You have what you need. It's like the girl that walks out of her house and sees her dad pinned under the car and lifts the car. She's completely equipped and utterly capable to do whatever it is she needs to do. And so are we all. So if that's true, why would I ever say I don't have enough time or enough money or enough strength or the right education or the right contacts? Why would I ever agree to any of that? If I am this guy, and we are this guy, you know, we are the children of God. We're the men and women of God. So it would be self-defeating to admit that we are limited. And I think actually that's probably why I kind of pushed back against those limits, because when I would get work orders that seemed impossible, I just didn't want to say this is impossible. I kind of wanted to say maybe we can do this. And so I did more and more and more and more. Now, you know, I had a situation that occurred one night. I mentioned that I told my brother-in-law about this, and he said, well, you know, that was just time just expanded for you. And I've heard other instances, but this is one that happened to me. I was riding my motorcycle from Salt Lake City to Boston. I used to live in Boston. And I was riding along the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, right along the north coast of Lake Michigan. It's a beautiful little 2-lane road, and I got, it got to be about 7 or 8 at night, and it was a nice little highway, and I thought, I'll just camp here by the lake. And in the morning, it was a beautiful morning, bright and dry, and I sat, as I often do, and made a few notes, as I sometimes do. I carry a little journal and make a few notes. And I wrote this from memory. I just wrote this from memory. And this is a statement that was written by Mary Baker Eddy some time ago in one of her articles that she originally wrote. Remember, thou canst be brought into no condition, be it ever so severe, where love has not been before thee, and where its tender lesson is not awaiting thee. And then I packed up my gear, put it on my bike, and headed north. I was headed for Sault Ste. Marie, and I was going to cut across Canada to go home to my home in Boston. And but now when I got back to this highway, this beautiful little 2-lane highway, it was all of a sudden a very busy artery. There was a lot of traffic, a lot of trucks, 70 miles an hour, no way in, there's no entry. You just got to be bang 70 miles an hour. There's no way to enter into this flow of traffic. So I was on a little bit of a curve like this, and I looked, and I made sure I had an opening. And then I jumped on my accelerator and headed north. But when I looked up, I realized I don't have a lane because there's somebody in my lane passing a truck passing another truck. And it was about, I later calculated, it was about 100 feet away. Now, 100 feet, I later figured, at 70 miles an hour, the closing interval on that is about 1 second, a little less than 1 second. So if somebody gave you a work order, right, that said you're going to have 1 second to move your motorcycle from in front of a moving truck, a truck traveling 70 miles an hour, you would say, no, I'm not going to do that. There's not enough time for that. But if it ever happens, I'll tell you how it goes. First thing I noticed, it didn't take me any time at all to recognize what was happening. I looked up, saw it, and resolved it. I noticed from the lines painted on the road that the truck in my lane was making a legal pass. Interesting, right? Irrelevant, but kind of in. Now, it was the first thing I noticed. He's making a legal pass. This guy who's 1 second away from taking me out. He's in a legal position. Next thing I noticed was nobody honked, which I think was helpful. Nobody honked. That would have introduced alarm, right, and fear into a situation. Nobody honked. But I noticed that he must have seen this happening before I did, because I could see he was trying to give me some room. You could just feel it more than anything else. And then I noticed a tiny little sliver of asphalt just outside the lane, and I just put my bike there. And then I raised my right hand. I'd had my left hand on the clutch. I raised my right hand to kind of signal to the driver, don't jackknife your truck, because I think I'll roll through here if you will just roll. And then I noticed, and he was right here, like where this fan is, and I saw him reach across his steering wheel and kind of wave to me out his side window. So, okay, so that's 1 second. What did we have? We had recognition, we had activity, we had goodwill, we had communication, we actually had a little gentlemanly wave between two guys on the road. And that's a lot, right, for 1 second. By the way, I had to stay where I was for another maybe 2 or 3 seconds because there were some cars right behind him making the same pass. And so I just stayed where I was and, never really, just stayed there until it all cleared. And then I accelerated and head for Sault Ste. Marie. And I was talking to my sister about that one time, and she said, wow, didn't you pull over and get some cold water on your face and kind of regroup? And I said, no, I didn't, but I was thinking about it because I thought, shoot, that couldn't have been more than 100 feet. How's 100 feet? That wasn't more than 1 second. That was severe. That was severe. That was ever so severe. So I thought, so what's my tender lesson? Okay, somehow that came back to me as I was riding north. I thought, what's my tender lesson? And the thought came to me, time can't touch your life. Time can't harm your life. The lack of time can't take your life away. You're free of time. You can do whatever you need to do. And by the way, that was super elegant. It was like a 1 second ballet. There was no fear. There was no anger. There was nothing. It was just pure activity. Now, as I was riding north, and I thought, okay, so time can't harm me. This is another one of those little gems that shows up in the Bible, and it's been there hidden in plain sight, and we've looked at it 100 times and probably have no idea what it means. But somebody wrote it down. Peter wrote that down. 1 day is with the Lord as 1,000 years. So I started thinking, well, I wonder what 1 second is then with the Lord. Right? And I had all day, so I started to do the math. It's actually a little bit of a convoluted computation, but it turns out that it's 4.2 days. So by this spiritual equation, I had essentially 4.2 days to resolve it. You know, which means really that time was irrelevant to it. I could have painted the road in that 4.2 days. Time was totally irrelevant to that situation. And by the way, all of us have stuff that comes up fast, and you have to address it, and you can address it. You do have what you need. But you know, the detail on this was kind of interesting, and a couple of years ago I rode around Lake Superior with my brother, and I now live in Chicago, and I thought, as I was coming down that same road, I thought, you know, I'm gonna see if I can find that spot, because maybe it's the way I remember it. And I thought, if I can find it, I'll know if it was really right. Was it really 70 miles an hour? Was it really the lines painted the way I remember them? Was it really 18 inches of asphalt? You know, all that. I wanted to find out. And so I found the spot. I found it and got off my bike and looked around, and it's exactly what I remember. And because I was able to kind of ascertain that, it suggested to me that something real happened there. My brother-in-law called it time expanded, but something actually happened. And it's the detail that enables us to know that. You know, when Jesus fed the multitude, right? We have that story. I guess he did it a couple times. But Jesus fed the multitude. And we have some detail. What are the details? What do we know about that? How many people were there? Total? Good. Okay, so it could be 10 or it could be 15, but it's at least 5 plus women and children. We know how much food they had. How much food did they have? 2 fish. 5 loaves, 2 fish. Okay, so that's detail. We know that that's what they had going in. We also know what they had coming out, right? What do they have coming out? 12 baskets. And by the way, Jesus remembered that later. Remember that? He was talking to his disciples and he said, you guys forget about the 12 baskets. It's important. The details make it interesting. Without that detail, we could have had the exact same experience, but we could have just thought of it as a nice little love-in on the hillside. But because we have the detail, we know something actually happened. And what enabled it to happen? The Christ enabled it to happen. I wanted to share something from Science and Health. This book makes an interesting distinction between Jesus and Christ. They are not exactly synonymous. And I'll just share a couple things with you. Christ's Christianity, this is from Science and Health. Christ's Christianity is the chain of scientific being, reappearing in all ages and maintaining its obvious correspondence with the Scriptures, and uniting all periods in the design of God. The word Christ is not properly a synonym for Jesus, although it is commonly so used. Christ is not a name so much as the divine title of Jesus. And you know Jesus himself said, you believe on me and the works that I do shall ye do also. So this concept of the eternal Christ, we couldn't do anything if it weren't possible, if that Christ wasn't available to us. Christ is not a name so much as the divine title of Jesus. Jesus is the name of the man who more than all other men has presented Christ, the true idea of God. Jesus is the human man, and Christ is the divine idea. The only thing that I think is valuable in that for us is it gives us the real traction to be able to prove that ourselves. Because I think what a lot of people do is they'll say, wow, when will Jesus finally come back and save us all? And what Jesus himself said is, hey, even Abraham, who lived 2,000 years earlier, before Jesus, he saw the Christ. He rejoiced to see it, was looking for it, and he saw it. And in fact, Jesus said one other thing. He said, anytime 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. And that would certainly include us right now. So that Christ distinct from the man Jesus is an important thing. I think Science and Health did a great service by defining that for us. I mentioned that if you think you need more time, and who doesn't, we all think, oh, shoot, if only I had more time. But what you really need is a better idea. And I was thinking about a friend of mine who's an architect, and he got himself in a big jam. He was behind the 8 ball on a project. It was an architectural model. And it was like making him nervous, right? Time, when you put time in the driver's seat, it'll shake you up physically. And this was kind of happening to him. He'd allowed himself to get behind on his timetable, and now he couldn't sleep and all the rest of it. And then one day, as he was nearing the deadline, his wife said, oh, by the way, we've got some people coming over for lunch. So he went to lunch. And over lunch, he sneezed, and this little girl said, God bless you. And it just caught his attention. He thought, look at this little 10-year-old girl brings a blessing to me. She sees my little sneeze. And suddenly, in that moment of recognition, he got an idea. And the idea was, I don't have to paint those pieces with a brush. I can spray paint those pieces. And he was done early. Have you ever done any spray painting? It is beyond fast. It's beyond fast. You spend more time cleaning up the equipment than the actual job. I've done a little bit. It's surprising how fast it goes. And that idea came to him, and he delivered his project early. So he was on the utter edge of failure when an idea reached him. And it changed everything. I worked at a steel mill when I was in college. Actually, it was a foundry where they pour iron. You've seen pictures of sparks and ladles full of molten stuff. Anyway, they had one, it was a big ring gear they made, and it was not as big as this room, but it was big. And they used to take one guy to clean up after this thing, and it would take him about 8 hours. But a friend of ours came one time, and he put a chain around this whole thing and just dragged it off and picked it up with a steam shovel, a little bobcat. And we just cheered. It was a whole new way of doing it. And it saved, instead of 8 hours, it was like 30 minutes. And the union didn't like it, and they made them go back and do it the old way. But it's a better idea that saves time. I'm going to get on an airplane tomorrow, and I'm going to fly, and it's going to take an hour. Whereas 100 years ago, that would have been a big deal for me to, make my way north. I would have had a cattle drive or something. I'd jump on a cattle drive. So a better idea is always going to eclipse time. Time is going to get quicker and quicker and quicker. So it's always going to come as an idea, not more time. Even if you get the extension you wish you had, you'll probably squander that. If we can live in the now, and I've been giving a lot of thought to this very topic, this idea of living in the now. And there's nothing to think about. There's nothing to worry about going forward. There's nothing to regret going backward. There's nothing to put off to tomorrow. That, by the way, that's what procrastination means. It means forward to tomorrow. It's like a very officious thing. I'm going to forward that to tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. Today's the day. This is the only time. Now's the time. And I do teach this class in Christian Science. And one of my students one year came out of a mainstream Christian church, and he said, we don't have salvation prior to death. And we talked about it. I said, yeah, but that's a long time to wait for something that's yours right now. As a matter of fact, we are agents of salvation ourselves. We are. Every time we do something that helps somebody, every time we pick up a piece of trash and put it where it belongs, every time we are useful to someone who needs something, that's an act of salvation. And so we are agents of salvation right now, and now is the time. We should save today. It's not, the day is young. There's probably something that each one of us can do tonight that should be done, and rather than wait till tomorrow. I also wanted to mention this idea of the moment, operating in the moment. Moment has the same meaning or the same root as momentum. So moment is moving forward. Progress is the law of God, meaning it's constant. It's an ongoing, never-ending requirement, demand. It's going on all the time. And that means it's going on right now, in this moment. And in fact, I saw this little statue. The guy in Chicago, Montgomery Ward, had this commissioned. But just look at this. This girl is moving forward. There's something moving forward about that image. It's called the Spirit of Progress. That's what that title is for that sculpture. And the point is, she is, and we are, this is a moment of progress. This is a forward-leaning moment right now. We're not just waiting for something to happen. We're moving into it, moving toward it. By the way, I set my watch down. Let me just see how we're doing here. Yeah, okay, I think we're good. We should end up right on the dot, shouldn't we? Truth, if it's ever been true, it's still true. I one time was cooking spaghetti in a dark kitchen for some reason, and I still do this. I don't know why I cook in the dark, but I was cooking in a dark kitchen. I was cooking spaghetti, and a noodle rolled across this cooktop, and I went to pick it up. And I pressed my fingers down, these 3 fingers, to pick up that noodle. And I don't know if I heard the hiss or smelled the smoke, but I burned up my fingers. I burned up my hand, and I was standing there in tremendous pain and I was just sad. How did I let this happen, you idiot? 5 seconds ago you were whole, and now look at you. You're all messed up. And it's going to take what? Time. It's going to take time, right, to resolve this? And as I was standing there, and it hurt like crazy, so I wasn't thinking very well. It wasn't like I was praying, but I was just standing thinking. And a thought came to me, there were some guys 2,500 years ago that went into a furnace and were not burned. 3 guys did that. And whatever it is they knew, whatever truth it was that preserved them, is still true. And that means it's true for me. And I can just tell you that the next morning when I went to get in a shower, I thought, oh, this is going to hurt. You put all that hot water on his hand, right? But when I stepped into the shower, it didn't hurt at all. And I thought, whoa, look at that. Those fingers were just perfect, just like this. No hard skin, no gray skin, no black skin, no blisters. It was just like this. Now, I guess my thought would be, Jesus said, our friend Jesus said, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And I would add, start by knowing there is a truth. Start by knowing that somebody's proven this, and it's still true. And I can do it too. If it's true, it's true. And I'm not left out of that truth. I'm embraced in that truth. You know, I have a friend. I used to work with this woman who couldn't walk for around 10 years. I don't know if she couldn't sit up. I didn't know her then. But I know she couldn't walk. And one day she was reading this book, Science and Health, and the idea came to her. It was almost like a little whisper came to her. You know, this is true for you. And that was the end of it. And she's been up ever since. She sailed her sailboat just a couple years ago from the Atlantic Ocean into the Great Lakes. She lives in Michigan, and she brought her sailboat through those inland waterways. Now, you've got to be active to be able to move a sailboat, and particularly, you know, for like 1,000 miles. So the truth is timeless. It is not, it once was true. The truth is true. That's the other thing about eternity and infinite life. It's all true now. It's all right now. You know, you've heard that time heals all wounds, and yet somehow you know that it doesn't. I used to sprain my ankles a lot. I played a bunch of games. I used to play racquetball, and then I played volleyball. I used to play volleyball 5 nights a week. And then I started playing tennis. I used to play a lot of tennis. But all the way through, I used to sprain my ankles. And I would tape them up, and I would put sleeves on them, elastic stuff, and like Velcroed plastic stuff, and pump up basketball shoes and everything else to stabilize those ankles. And yet I would sprain them. And not too long ago, I was playing tennis, platform tennis. You know what platform tennis is? You probably don't know. It's a winter game. You play it outside in the winter. You have to shovel the court off. You play in a cage. Anyway, I was playing this game. I used to play a couple nights a week. And I sprained my ankle. And I taped it up with duct tape and continued to play. But it was weak and worthless. So I took a couple of weeks off. And I went back to play. But my ankle was still just worthless. So I took a couple more weeks off. You know, it's not fair to everybody else on the court if you can't hold your own. So I thought I'll rest some more. And then I was walking in my driveway, and I twisted that ankle again. It was my left ankle. And then I was walking a couple weeks later with a couple dogs in the woods, and I turned it again. And now I'm standing like sad again. I was just sad because I'd now wasted 6 weeks trying to rest this ankle and strengthen it. And look at me, I'm standing on one foot. I can't even walk. And the thought came to me, you know, Dave, time and rest are not making that ankle any stronger. If anything, it's getting weaker. You're twisting it over nothing. And then I thought, you know, you have to think differently. And I thought, okay, I will. I'll think differently. And a thought came to me, you got to think radically differently. And I thought, okay, I will. What's the radical thought? And it came to me, the original accident never happened. Well, that's way radical, right? Like, that's ludicrous. I'm standing on one foot. But I like to play. And it's worth it to me to accept that radical premise rather than argue it and say that's impossible, that's impractical, that violates what I've come to expect from the human situation. I accept it. I said, okay, I accept the original accident never happened. Now what? And a thought came to me, you better be careful walking out of here, though, because there's ice and snow and all this stuff. And I thought, hold it. Why would I be careful not to re-injure something if it never was injured? Would I? I thought, no, I really wouldn't, and I'm not going to. And before I could think another thought, I began to walk. And from the moment the foot hit the ground, I could feel the strength in it. It was immediate. Immediately, his feet and ankle bones received strength. I walked out of those woods, and that very night, I played. I'm sure it was that very night. And I've never taped my ankle since. I've never had a sprained ankle since that I can remember. And I have, you might say I have assumed that I can do what I need to do without a bunch of rigmarole and tape. Just think of the money I save on tape these days. Now, by the way, when you declare the original accident never happened, which one are we talking about? Are we talking about this one that just happened? Or the one that happened 6 weeks ago? Or are we talking about the one that happened when I was in high school and has been continuously happening ever since? Or are we really talking about the one that happened 60,000 years ago when the first caveman rolled the first ankle? When you declare this truth, it goes everywhere. It goes everywhere. You have affirmed what is true, and it's always going to be true. It's never been true about God's man. God's man is throughly furnished unto all good works, and that includes ankles. Includes everything, includes fingernails, includes everything that man needs to accomplish, whether that's cars or whatever he requires, man has. You know, I wanted to share one real quick thing with you, speaking of man has. Let's see if I can find it. This is in a book also written by Mary Baker Eddy. It's a compilation of various articles that she wrote over her lifetime. And it says here, Christian Science comes to reveal man as God's image, his idea, coexistent with him, God giving all and man having all that God gives. We're not waiting to somehow one day hopefully receive. We have. You know, last time I was down here in April in Dallas, and I met a young woman who was, she played in her marching band. She played the flute in her marching band. And I asked her, do you have your own flute? And she said, yes, I do. I said, is it a good flute? She said, yes, it's a Jupiter flute. I said, is that a good one? She said, yes, it is. So here's an 18-year-old girl who has. She's not hoping one day to get. And she'll always have. And we always have. God's man always has. So time isn't going to heal. Time's no part of healing. What is part of healing is thought. Let it change. Let your thought change. Now let's just talk a minute about age, because age is like a cumulative time thing. It's a bunch of time accumulated. And a lot of people want to know your age, and they want to kind of categorize you by your age. And I recommend that you kind of defy that, and defy it at every level. Defy it for your 4-year-old son, and defy it for yourselves and for your parents, and just defy age altogether. Defy it for your dogs. Age has no part of life. Age is time. And we don't want any part of it. So, like I could say, well, I'm a white male of a certain age, and I live in a certain zip code, and I have a certain income and a certain education. Or I could say, actually, I'm just an ageless, timeless, useful, indestructible concept. I'm throughly furnished. I can do whatever is mine to do, and age will never stop. Do you know, I met a guy up in New Hampshire. He ran a trucking company, and he told me that he had driven a big truck, 18-wheeler, 4 million miles without an accident. This guy's very advanced, 4 million miles, never had an accident with his, well, that's natural. God doesn't know anything about accidents, and this guy just understood that. So think of spiritual qualities rather than demographic qualities. I wanted to read something. This is kind of a surprising thing. Mary Baker Eddy wrote in her magazine. She founded this magazine. It's called the Christian Science Journal. This is a current issue of it, but this was originally founded in 1883, and it's been published every month since. And in one of the early articles, someone asked, she used to answer questions. People would ask questions and she would answer them. And somebody asked, is it possible to change the aged form to one of youth, beauty, and immortality without the change called death? That's the question. Here's her answer. The deformities and infirmities said to be the inevitable results of age, under the opposite mental impressions, disappear. You change the physical manifestations in proportion to your changed thoughts of the effect of accumulating years. Expecting an increase of usefulness and vigor from advanced years, with as much faith as you looked for decrepitude and ugliness, a favorable result would be sure to follow. The added wisdom of age and experience is strength, not weakness. And we should understand this, expect it, and know that it is so, and then it would appear. In Science and Health, she's even more pointed about it. She says, the measurement of life by solar years robs youth and gives ugliness to age. Never record ages. You know, that's a singular command. Never record ages. Now, I don't recommend that you lie about your age. I know somebody who does that and they forget, you know, they go to get back online, they forget what they wrote down. I wouldn't do that. But I would correct it in your own thought. You're not a product of age, passing years, and the limits associated with that. There was a guy who came up to me after one of these events and said, Dave, I want you to see my new car. It's a brand new Ford Mustang convertible. I said, yeah, I'd like to see it. And he said, it's my midlife crisis. He proudly says. I said, no, man, that's a God-given Ford Mustang. Don't, and every age has its stuff, you know, like terrible twos, you've heard of that. Even infants have stuff. And teenage angst, and, you know, every age. If you're going to define yourself mortally, mort means death. So I would recommend stay out of that altogether and start it right now, tonight. You're not aging or any part of age. Now, this is something that Mary Baker Eddy wrote, that mind measures time according to the good that has unfolded. If you go to work and punch a clock and stay there for 8 hours and then punch out, good for you. But if you go to work and do some good and advance the cause you're working for, whether they deserve it or not, you deserve it. You know, there was an actor in Hollywood that said, I never gave my best work because they never were willing to pay me what I deserve. And I said, come on, man, this is you. Give your best, do your best. Think. You're an idea machine. You're an idea processor. And give your company, whoever it is, the benefit of those ideas. You know, just as a final statement, just as we're kind of wrapping this up, this magazine I mentioned, the Christian Science Journal, in one of the very, very early issues, there was an article written by Mary Baker Eddy. She was the original publisher and the original editor. And there was an article called The New Birth. And she says, the new birth is not the work of a moment, but it begins with moments and goes on with years. And the reason I kind of want to share this with you guys is this is simple. These are simple things. It doesn't say go to Harvard and get a divinity degree. It says surrender to God. Moments of surrender to God. Get rid of your self-will and just let God guide you. Moments of childlike trust. Joyful adoption of good. Moments of self-abnegation. You know what that means, right? Self-abnegation. Science and Health is very big on self-abnegation. It means, I think, each one of us probably has a sense of it. I think what it means is get your own self-interests out of the way and allow yourself to be useful to the larger, to God. Be useful to God. I had a situation one night, just kind of a quick example. I was playing basketball in a gym north of Chicago. I took my coat off and put it on the floor. And I figured I'll just watch my coat while I'm here. I'm not going to be here that long. And within about a minute, I looked over, my coat was already gone. I thought, I can't believe this. Someone took my coat. So I was running around. It was wintertime, and I needed the coat. And I was looking around for it. And the thought came to go out this door and look outside. But when I got to the door, there were 3 guys that was on a landing. I'd come down to this landing, and there was a stairway up, and 3 guys were coming up the stairs. And I thought, normally I would hold the door. Normally I'd be a gentleman and hold the door for these 3 guys. But because I'm so busy now looking for my coat, I'm not going to hold the door. I don't have time. Don't have time to be a gentleman here. And then the thought came to me, really? Is it come to that now? That you can't even hold the door? And I thought, you know what? And it was kind of a moment of self-abnegation, because I kind of thought, I may never see that coat again, but I am going to hold this door. And I just waited. And these 3 guys walked past me, one of whom was wearing my coat. And I was able to reacquire it. The thing is, that self-abnegation, it did take that. It took a moment of me getting a hold of myself and deciding I am going to do the right thing here, despite what's happening to me. And when I did that, then all this good happened. So self-abnegation is not bad for you. It's good for you. Self-abnegation, self-consecration, heaven-born hope, and spiritual love. So those are our moments. And we might as well, just accept them and go with it and watch where it will take you places you've never dreamed of. Okay, so just to really recap what we've been talking about the truth. It's always been true. This is not time warps or some newfangled something or other. It's not Scientology. It's not human mind control. It's just the truth. It's the truth of an unlimited life. The Bible contains it. The Bible's full of these little nuggets of truth, and it takes inspiration to get them. Science and Health explains it. In metaphysics, time is irrelevant. Time disappears altogether. It's immediate, no medium. If it's yours to do, do it. Don't let the clock start telling you what's yours to do and what you can't do. You do what's yours to do, and you know what it is. And if it's necessary for you, it's definitely going to be possible for you. The timeless Christ is the factor. It's this eternal Christ, which is ever present and available to any one of us at any time. And it's always going to be an idea rather than more time. You really don't want more time. You want a better idea. If it's ever been true for anyone ever, it's true still. And that means it's true for us. Time doesn't heal. You know that. You somehow know that. And I'll bet everyone here knows somebody who's carrying some wound. Somebody stabbed them somewhere along the line or betrayed them or something, and they've never gotten over it. So time doesn't do it, but thought does. You can change your thought. I know a guy who was, a girl broke up with him when he was a teenager, and it just devastated him. He just totally blindsided him, totally surprised him. And he went to a park, and he just sat in this park and just thought about God and love for, I think it was 1 or 2 hours. And he walked out of there completely free. And where some people carry those scars, for a long time. Be deliberately ageless. Think of yourself in, not demographic terms, spiritual terms. Remind yourself who you really are. And then immortal measurements, you're not just punching a clock, you're actually delivering value. You deliver value. Whether your employer deserves it or not, you deserve it. And then they're God's moments. Everything we have is God's. Everything we have is God's. These chairs belong to God. They're being used tonight for this event. By the way, this reading room, which is the Richardson Reading Room, I stopped by there the other day and bought a Bible, and it's open every single day, 6 days a week, right? This Christian Science Journal includes information on every church, every reading room, and there's another magazine that talks about lectures and so forth, but you can find a lot of resources right there in the back of that Christian Science Journal, including this one, which is open 6 days a week. I passed right through that portal the other day. And you can see right around Dallas, there are quite a few churches. So if you want to pursue this further, there are a lot of resources to be able to do it. And there's some online resources too, including ChristianscienceTexas.org, csreadingroomrichardson.com. I don't know if you can read these. The blue is kind of hard to read, but ChristianScience.com is a great resource. It'll give you access to everything. You can get in there and just click around and find lectures all over the world, churches all over the world. And then if you want to know more about Mary Baker Eddy, there's a whole website there. It's extremely searchable, and I have found a lot of stuff through there myself. And then this, if you want, there's a little reading list that you can download if you want. I just show you a copy of it. It's a bunch of articles and different things that I have collected on the topic, and you can download it from my website if you want it. Anyway, is there anything that I left hanging here? Like, sometimes I start to tell a story and I forget to finish it. Did anything like that? No? Is there any just something that somebody needs to get off their chest? Yeah. Oh, this one says DaveHohle.com. Dave Hohle. You know, I've got this odd name. It's a Norwegian name. And nobody else wanted that URL but me. So, DaveHohle.com. Anyway, thank you very much. I really love being with you guys. A beautiful room.